I've just finished watching the replay of my live stream from this morning, September 1st, and I felt compelled to make a standalone video out of this. The theme, Plantman cometh. Plantman, you ask. An idea that I had over a year ago. One of my viewers, Barry Simon, took it on himself to send me an email with a t-shirt design showcasing the evolution of Plantman, who I named Homo Adventis after the Advent healthcare system and the Seventh-day Adventists who brought us the current state of medicine in this country and the rest of the world for that matter. It's a theme that I think is important for people to start to understand. And I decided to make this standalone video because very few people will ever get to see what I said about Plantman, introducing him on this live stream. So I proudly present, well, me from this morning, and I hope you'll find this entertaining. There's some humor in it, but it's really not funny. It's really not funny. Hope you enjoy it. Take it away, Mitch. Between 1.2 billion and 1.6 billion years ago is when a living cell we talked about this, swallowed up the bacteria that it didn't absorb, but rather formed a symbiotic relationship with, that eventually led to mitochondria in all living cells, and has been named the first eukaryote cell. At that point, the beginning of the split between plants and animals happened, and that split occurred over hundreds of millions of years, one little accident at a time, until we had a plant kingdom and an animal kingdom. And the differences that happened in that, let's say, 750 million years after, up until about 500-600 million years ago, that difference became profound, and most of it gave plants the ability for photosynthesis, and humans not. We are not built of exactly the same stuff that plants are built of. The point of this little exercise is basically, if we're not built of the same stuff plants are built of, why the hell are we eating plants? Why are we not convinced that we have to get our raw building materials from animals because we are animals? That accounts eventually for the fact that we sunburn. That is the birth of Plantman. Plantman. Plantman is my new character that I'm going to start making videos about. Plantman. It's about the absolutely short stopping of human evolution because of our interference, selective breeding, genetic modification. We have put a halt to evolution, that God is here, and think we're smart enough to direct it. And in the process, we are now, as a race and species, believe it or not, closing the gap between the animal and the plant kingdom. We are probably the only animal that's doing that. The animals that are herbivores eat plants, but process them differently. They don't eat them for their raw materials. They eat them basically, or the building materials, they eat them for the ability of their gut microbiome to convert them to fatty acids. We don't do that. We don't have that kind of gut anymore. So we eat more for building materials, and we eat fat for energy, which is what our ancestors did. It all depends on what kind of machinery you have. But we are now evolving into plant man, as evidenced by the fact that we can't go out in the sun without sunscreen, without looking like we're dressed for a snowstorm, covering every square inch of our exposed skin, without sunglasses on to keep the sunlight from damaging our eyes, because we're becoming plant man. I read a number of times, the estimates are that some 20% of the sterols used to build the cell membranes of human beings are now plant sterols. They're bent on making photosynthesis happen. We're not supposed to get our energy from photosynthesis. We absorb other things from the sunlight, different wavelengths that do certain things, but we don't live on like plants do on photosynthesis. That's why plants don't have to get up and walk around and hunt other plants. They get their energy from the sunlight. We are now replacing cholesterol, which is the human sterol, with plant sterols. They're so close in molecular structure that in the absence of animal sterols, our bodies use the plant sterols to fill in. And because of that, we're turning ourselves into plants. Hence, Plant Man. So you're going to hear a lot about Plant Man in the future. I just keep trying to come up with new ways to convince people we are not supposed to eat plants. God, they're trying to poison us. We all believe that now, but the average person doesn't. They're still brainwashed into believing that they're healthy. Nobody even thinks about the fact that the plants we eat today don't even resemble the plants that our ancestors hunted or gathered. Anthony says, lived in tropicals 3 years, don't burn much. If you've been a carnivore for more than 2 years, because I have also read from studies, if you don't eat plants for a couple of years, your body eventually, in its normal cell replacement and rebuilding process, so autophagy and like that, will eventually rid your body of all the plant sterols, and all of your new cells will be built out of animal sterols. And that explains the observable phenomenon that carnivores, including me, do not sunburn anymore. Don't have to wear sunglasses outside. Don't have to wear a hat over my bald head and not continue to get pre-cancers like I was. That all went away. The evidence is there. It's almost irrefutable if people will look in our direction. But the only thing they see when they look at our direction are a bunch of lunatics bent on killing themselves. And any of us that have any interaction with the medical community feel the condemnation from these people. Unfortunately, there are times when you need them or you're thrown into their nonsense, kicking and screaming like I was when I had the stroke. But my stroke recovery, at least the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks of it, were to get out of that alive and just not take any of their advice and not even worry about the fact that, well, maybe they're right. They are all wrong about everything. They wanted me on drugs that would have killed me. I never would have recovered. I'm not fully recovered yet, but I never would have recovered as much as I had I taken their advice and their prescriptions. They were convinced that the only thing that caused my stroke was high cholesterol. And that was caused by the fact that I ate only meat. I mean, they were convinced. They knew that because everybody knows that. Some of them were even taught that in medical school by people who also knew that. They don't know where it came from. If they knew where that information came from, they might step back and take a look at themselves and say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the reason that meat's bad for me is because Ellen G. White was told by God that red meat causes impure sexual thoughts in men and makes them masturbate, and formed the Seventh-day Adventist religion. And like Kilt said, the Seventh-day Adventist religion in the late 1800s, spearheaded by Ellen G. White and her crew, and all of her prophecies from God while she was in a coma that told her that meat is bad and is sinful, and her hooking up with a young doctor named John Harvey Kellogg, who wasn't a doctor yet, but a 17-year-old editor who went and helped Ellen G. White edit all of her conversations with God that she made notes of. I think they say 2,000 of them, and get them published into the book, and was around at the formation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, whose doctrine was don't eat meat, vegetarianism. And Ellen G. White and these new Seventh-day Adventists sent John Harvey Kellogg to medical school. Medical school. When he got out of medical school, he was now Dr. Kellogg. They bought, the Seventh-day Adventists bought and owned the sanitarium at Battle Creek. And they installed John Kellogg as its leader. Kellogg's mission was to get people to stop eating meat. That was his mission. It was a mission from God. He and his brother invented cornflakes. It was a food guaranteed not to promote sexual thoughts in men, do the opposite, to neuter men. One of the reasons it probably did this was because we all know now that eating excessive amounts of high glycemic carbohydrates lowers cholesterol. They bragged about it. Cheerios lowers cholesterol. All that stuff lowers cholesterol. And lowering cholesterol makes men less masculine. We've taken it to the real extreme now because we're on a mission started by the Seventh-day Adventists to basically castrate every living male on the planet chemically. Can the people in the medical community not see this pattern? Can't they see the history? I'm not making this stuff up. It's recorded. It's out there. It's documented. Thank you, Nina Teicholz and Gary Taubes, for doing the research to uncover this path. And that's what we're operating under today. The entire practice of medicine. The food pyramid. And even knowing the truth about where it came from. The nonsense and utter utter folly of it that goes against all of nature. We got woke. We don't even understand our sexual identity anymore. We have been so emasculated. It's politically incorrect to be a man anymore. You need to be an it now. At 3 years old, according to them, you need to be allowed to determine what sex you are. Where did this come from? So who's the oddball? People out there, none of you listening here, of course, but who's the oddball these days? Us? Or the other 99.999% of the people that now think this is the definition of normal for a human being? Wow, 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 wow. Meathead says, Mitch, this doesn't fit their narrative that dumbs down the masses. Of course, it's all about profit, corruption, but ultimately control. It's all about control. And I've got to tell you that a human being whose goal in life is to have power over other human beings is a very sick puppy to start with. And definitely the last person you should take any advice or follow as a leader. Unfortunately, the dumb masses in most cases, and I'll say up until recently, elect the appropriate leaders for them and never get out of the herd. That's a little rant for this morning, but it's the truth. And I'm hoping, I've been playing around with AI a little bit and getting it to draw Plantman for me, getting it to come up with the character of Plantman. And I'm going to be talking more about that because I think just telling people plants trying to kill you is becoming an old hat. We all believe that. Nobody else does. I don't think that message is going to change a lot of minds into the future, because you'll be talking. You're talking chemistry. You're talking dynamics of species self-preservation that people don't understand. People don't understand evolution usually. So many people couch that in religious terms, with a big guy in charge making all the decisions. Very few people have studied anthropology, cellular biology, and all that stuff, and noticed the patterns of how this stuff came up over billions of years. They don't want to know that. They want to know who's in the football game and what's the Vegas line on it this weekend. Who won American Idol, and who's Taylor Swift really marrying. That's where our collective heads are, very far up our collective butts, being fed this stuff to keep us tame, like Robert says, weak and meek. And it's easy. It's easy. We don't have to think anymore. And now we've got Google to think for us, so even easier. And the age and the day of critical thinking and philosophy itself is dying. And a few of us keep railing against this paradigm. In a last-ditch effort, I think, to save the human race in general, we will be evolutionarily deselected as we get dumber. And Hollywood, in its infinite wisdom, makes movies about apocalypses, dystopias. And it may very well be that the Planet of the Apes might not be that far-fetched 1,000 years from now. I truly believe that. We got to turn this around somehow. And the best we can do is turn it around for ourselves, I think. And that means we pretty much have to avoid the rest of the people, because all they're going to do is try to convince us that we're wrong. And it's very hard in this world. There's plenty of us that realize that we're doing it right and why we're doing it right, and are very frustrated because we want to help, because we're good people. Where did all that come from? Keep an eye out for Plantman. It is a truth, and I'm hoping that the concept of Plantman, superhero, Plantman, and using Plantman as an example that people can understand. And anybody that goes out to the beach today wearing tents of clothes and floppy hats and sunglasses, smearing themselves with sunscreen, should know that the reason they can't just frolic in the sun, get the vitamin D that they need, stop putting poisonous chemicals all over their skin. And anybody that doesn't think the skin is an organ that absorbs poisons as fast as anything else has never had a case of poison ivy. I'm hoping Plantman, as an example, will give people a glimpse into the future of where human evolution is going, unless we go back to the basics that got us here before we started screwing it up. And that was in the late 1800s, when Ellen G. White and God decided. Well, Ellen, said God, evidently this evolution isn't working, because all men want to do is chase women and have sexual thoughts. But we can't have that. And Ellen, of course, wasn't smart enough to say to God, well, how do you explain the fact that we got here? If we weren't reproducing all the way, we would have died out long ago. Well, that never came up, because that required a little bit of critical thinking. And God said, I don't care. I'm going to decree that this is the way it is. I'm God, and you need to obey. And brainwashed Ellen said, yes, sir, or ma'am, or it, depending on. With her, it was probably yes, ma'am, because she was she was crusading for women's rights at the same time. So we'll give her the fact that God was a woman, and it became the doctrine of their new church, which now controls pretty much the entire healthcare system on the planet Earth, because shit like that can just happen in this world. And we have the Advent healthcare system. I have, just for fun, I have given a Latin species name, part of the taxonomy. I have named Plantman, given him his own species. I talked about this last year in a video. Nobody really caught it. But I'm going to tell you right now what to look out for. Plantman is not a Homo sapien anymore. Becoming too different to be classified as a modern human or Homo sapien. He's becoming a hybrid of humans and plants. And in homage to the start of all of this madness, of all of this ill health, suffering, pain, heart attacks, cancer, strokes, everything, Plantman should have his own genus. It's part of the genus Homo, which dates back about 2 or 3 million years to Homo erectus, Homo naledi, Homo afarensis, all the homos, of which Homo sapien is the latest and last remaining one. Well, we got a new one now. And I decree here on this day, and I hope that the historians write this down in the history books, that his name is Homo Adventis. I hope you understand the significance of what I just said. Homo Adventis, the next iteration of the human species. And if we don't change our ways, it won't be long before Homo sapien is a thing of the past, like Neanderthal, Homo neanderthalis, and all the homos that came before us. We are evolving into a new species if we continue defying all of the laws and processes that are responsible for the fact that we are alive today. And we're seeing it happen in only a very few generations. And normally that only happens at times of extinction events and bottlenecks, not when there's 8 billion people on the world, all misguided like they are.